先ほどのコメントでございますが、日本の財政状況は米国の状況とよりもっと深刻であるということでございます。そしてまた国会は3週間しか残っていないということを考えますと、お金がなくなってしまったらどうされるんでしょうか。つまり公務員の給料を払えない、あるいはお給料を上げないというような状況が実際に発生するんでしょうか。
それがいつ発生するかは、いくつかの考え方がありますが、少なくとも秋にはそういう事態になりかねないと。したがって、この国会でこの法律を成立させなければならないというふうに考えています。
In regard to when exactly such a situation might arise, there are many ways of looking at the situation, and many proposals or suggestions have been made. However, I can say, as I mentioned earlier, that at the very least, sometime in the fall, we will run out of money. We will not be able to pay people, and that is why we have to work very hard to pass this bill.
私は野党の皆さんにも、あるいは知事の皆さんにももっとこの問題危機感を持ってもらいたいと思うわけです。現実に政府からお金が来なくなるということになれば、知事や市町村長の皆さんも大変お困りになる、住民に対する責任を果たせなくなるわけで、みんな他人事のような顔をしているというのはいかがなのかというふうに思います。
As a result, I do take this problem very seriously, and I would like to make an appeal not only to my colleagues in the opposition parties, but also to the heads of regional governments throughout Japan, for example, the prefectural governors. I think many people do not see this problem as being a really viable or really crisis level issue, and I think it is a crisis level issue because if the national government runs out of money, the national government will not be able to send monies to the regional governments. You will see, therefore, that the governors and also the mayors in different cities will find themselves in a very difficult situation where they will not be able to fulfill their responsibilities to the citizens. I would like for these people in the opposition parties and in the regional governments not to look at this debate as being someone else's problem, but something that is very much going to affect adversely all of Japan.
Jimbo-san, and then the lady, but first Jimbo-san.
Terry Jimbo with the Video News. Mr. Okada, you said you have been making unbearable compromises. So I have a question about the renewable energy bill. How much compromise are you willing to make? What are the basic minimum component it has to have for the bill or for the law to be effective? And please also mention your view on the surcharge, the wafukakin. Is 0.5 yen per kilowatt per hour enough, in your view, for the renewable energy to be promoted? And just one more, you are the head of the global warming panel of DPJ, who are responsible to put together DPJ's climate change bill policy. What is your prospect for the two other pillars of DPJ's global warming policy, which are carbon tax and cap and trade? Thank
you. 先ほどねじれ国会のために耐え難い妥協をずっと耐え難い状況を切り抜いて妥協ばっかりをされているというお話をされたのでございますが、再生エネルギー法案に関しましてどれぐらい妥協する心づもりがあるのでございますでしょうか。つまり法案が効果的であるために最低これだけは必要なものっていうのはあるんでございますでしょうか。例えば具体的に申し上げますと賦課金でございますでしょうか。1時間の1キロワットあたりに 0.5 円で十分だと思いますのでしょうか。そしてまたそれと関連する質問などございますが、気候変動のパネル、民主党の中の気候変動パネルのトップでいらっしゃるのでございますが、気候変動に関しましては、特に炭素税とあとキャップ&トレードに関しましてはどのようなお考えをお持ちでございましょうか。
私は先ほど全てを自然エネルギーに置き換えるわけにはいかないというふうに申し上げましたが、しかし自然エネルギーを 飛躍的に増やさなければいけないというのは私の議論の前提です。私は地球温暖化の問題にここ5年ほど懸命に取り組んできた政治家の一人であります。
I mentioned earlier that I do not think we could immediately turn over all of our energy sources into renewable energy sources. That is simply not realistic. Having said this, however, I believe that we must dramatically increase our use or dependence on natural energy sources. In regard to your comment, yes, I have been very, very much involved in the issue of global warming for the past 5 years. I'm perhaps one of the most active politicians in Japan in regard to this issue.
温暖化ガスを減らすためには、まず必要になるのはエネルギーの消費量を減らすことです。これは幸いにして最近日本の社会の中でこの夏はですね、非常に電力消費量が減っていることは喜ばしいことですが、こういうものをよりきちんと仕組みの問題として実現していかなくてはなりません。省エネルギーですね。
When we talk about the increase of gases that contribute to global warming, I believe that the first thing and most important thing that we need to do as a world society is to reduce our energy consumption. And recently what we have seen in Japan this past summer is that the entire society has worked very, very hard to reduce its energy consumption. I think this is a very, very positive thing when we consider this problem over the long term. However, what we need to do is to make sure that this becomes a more systematic approach.
そして、その上でですね、3本の具体的な政策、つまり炭素税、そしてキャップ&トレード、そして固定価格買取制度、これは具体的な自然エネルギーを増やすための政策になります。
And based on this, I believe, therefore, that we should continue to pursue the 3 pillars of measures to combat global warming. They are, as you basically mentioned, the carbon tax and the cap and trade, and also to the fixed price purchasing of renewable energy.
炭素税についてはすでに我々の提案の中に法案として国会に出されていますが、残念ながら野党の賛同を得られるに足りず、まだ成立をしていない状況です。私は野党とこの原発の事故もありましたので、もう一度しっかり話し合いをしたいと思っています。
In regard to the first pillar, which is the carbon tax, we have already presented a bill to the Diet for deliberation. However, because we were not able to get the cooperation or support of the opposition parties, we have not been able to pass it. Now that we have experienced this nuclear power plant accident, I intend to speak with my colleagues in the opposition parties to see if we cannot find some kind of way to pass this bill.
キャップ&トレードは、私はもう少し議論をしないと日本に直ちに導入することには慎重です。
In regard to the cap and trade policy, I believe that this is an area where we need more deliberation or discussion within Japan. I do not think it is something that we can immediately incorporate into Japan.
そして最後の固定価格買取制度フィットですけれども、具体的な今ご提案がありましたが、これはまさしく今国会の場で与野党で話し合っていることですので、幹事長である私があまり言わない方がいいと、早くとにかく法案を成立させたいというふうに思っています。
In regard to the last pillar, which is the FIT, the buying renewable energy at fixed prices, you gave very specific figures. However, as this is a matter that is being very specifically discussed in the Diet at present between the opposition and ruling parties, it is a very delicate situation. And as the Secretary General of the ruling party, I do not believe it would be wise to make any specific comments. All I can say is that we want to pass this bill as quickly as possible.
Yes. There is also Mr. Kimitsu, the other co-chair of our PAC committee. Thank you. Please.
ブルームバーグの坂巻です。先ほど、子ども手当に関して野党との協議で妥協すればするほどハードルが高くなるとおっしゃったんですが、その子ども手当を含めて、公債特例法案を通すための条件、その野党との協議の見通しはどうなのか、そしてこの国会中に、総理が条件として退陣の条件としている、特例公債法、そして再生エネルギーの法案は通る可能性の見通しはどうなのか、通らなかったら どうなると幹事長として見通しを持っているのか教えてください。
Can you identify yourself, please?
My name is Sakamaki of Bloomberg News.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about the child allowance. You mentioned earlier that the more you compromise, the more the higher the hurdles that are presented by the opposition parties, including this child allowance. Can you tell us what your forecast is, or how you see the passage of this the deficit covering bond issuance bill? In other words, what kind of compromise you can expect on the child allowance issue to be able to get this bill passed? And taking this question even further, what do you think are the prospects for actually passing this deficit bond issuance bill, and also the renewable energy bill? In other words, these are the two bills that must be passed in order to fulfill the requirement of Mr. Khan that he needs them passed before he can step down. How do you see the passage of these bills, and if in the worst possible case they do not pass, what will happen?
第2次補正予算もできましたので、カンソル自ら言われた3つの案件のうち残っているのは、公債特例、赤字国債を発行する公債特例法案、そして自然エネルギー法案です。私はカンさんが辞める辞めないにかかわらず重要な法案ですから真面目にしっかり議論して、そして、成立させてもらいたいというふうに思っております。これを積極的に使うというのは全くの国民世代であると思います。
As you know, we have already been successful in passing the second supplementary budget. As a result, we've been able to clear one of the requirements that was presented by Mr. Khan as the conditions for his stepping down. The two other issues that are remaining are these two bills, as you've mentioned, the deficit covering bonds issuance bill and the natural energy sources bill. These bills, I think, however, are very, very crucial in themselves, very important in themselves. And whether or not Mr. Khan steps down or doesn't step down, I would like very much for my colleagues, all of the Diet members involved, to deliberate these bills with all seriousness. I do not think that using these bills as political tools to further political goals is something that is good for the Japanese people. In fact, that kind of activity is something that completely ignores the interests of the Japanese people.
こういう法案が通らなければ総理は辞めるのかとか辞めないのかという仮定のご質問についてはお答えしないのが賢明だと思います。
In regard to this hypothetical question that you raised, if the bills pass or don't pass, will Mr. Khan step down or will he not? For this kind of hypothetical question, I believe that it is probably wise not to comment on them.
ただ最初に申し上げたかと思いますが、今非常に重要なこの被災地に対して第3次補正予算を成立をさせ、案を作り国会で成立をさせ、そして実施をすると、このことはやはり新しい体制の下で、やることが私は望ましいというふうに考えております。国民の利益を考えれば当然そういうことだと思います。
But as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the most important issues that faces us at present is the condition of the people in the devastated areas. And I've said also that in order to be able to help these devastated areas, it is very, very important to pass a third supplementary budget as quickly as possible. To be more precise, I think that a supplementary budget should be formulated as specific policies be formulated, and eventually this bill should be passed, this budget should be passed, and the policy should be implemented. All of this activity, I believe, however, should be done under a new taisei or a new system, a new approach, a new makeup of people.
こういったからといって私と菅総理の間に意見の違いがあるわけではありません。そこは共通の認識だと私は確信しています。
Having said this, however, I would not want you to interpret these comments as meaning that Mr. Khan and I differ in our thoughts about these issues. I believe that we have very common ideas and goals.
Sam.
recently talk has started about renewing talks with North Korea, and I've heard very little, if anything, from the Japanese government. One of the items is renewing the food aid. Another one is, of course, is Japan's attitude on the abductees. I've heard nothing about the Yokotas or Mayumi from this government. If you made any statement, I've missed it, I'm afraid. And the third item, the Americans are now talking about putting a cap on the number of nuclear weapons that North Korea would be permitted. In other words, you give up on or denuclearization of the North, accept a certain number, and negotiate the cap for North Korean nuclear weapons. What are your ideas on those points?
最近、米国の方では、北朝鮮と、交渉をまた再開した方がいいんじゃないか、というような、話が出ております。あまり日本ではそれは大きく取り上げられていないと思います。で、この再交渉を開始するということでございますが、特にその食料品援助、そしてまた横田めぐみさんなどを含めたその、ごめんなさい。拉致問題でございますね。拉致被害者の件、そしてまたその、核問題でございますが、今まではその、朝鮮半島を非核化しようという動きがあったのでございますが、これはある意味でも、ギブアップする、諦めるということで、とりあえず北朝鮮が保有してもいいその、核兵器の、上限を設ける、キャップをつける、というような話が出ていると思いますが、これについてどうお考えでございましょうか。上限ですよね。
私はキャップの議論を承知しておりません。いずれにしても北朝鮮の非核化を実現するのは日本として安全保障上極めて重要な政策目標です。そこは変わりません。
In regard to this idea of capping the number of nuclear weapons, this is not something that I've heard anything about. I don't really know about this issue. But I can say that the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is something that is very, very important to Japan. It is very important for the security of Japan and is therefore a very important policy goal for the nation.
私はアメリカの議論を詳細に承知しておりませんが、拉致問題はもちろん引き続き今にとって極めて重要な政策課題であります。食料援助の問題は本格的な食料援助というのは拉致問題やあるいは核の問題がある中で簡単に実現するではないというふうに考えています。
I don't know very specifically what kind of discussions are going on at present, for example, in the United States about restarting these negotiations with North Korea. However, I can say that in regard to the abductee issue, this goes without saying it is a continuingly important policy item for Japan. In regard to food aid, when we consider the other aspects of our relationship with North Korea, when we consider the denuclearization issue, when we consider the abductee issue, I do not think a simple decision about just food aid should be made without taking these other issues into consideration.
One question, please.
ハイポサイコではなくて、現実の話をしたいと思います。国民主義論説の藤田博之と申します。今、これからの日本の政治と民主党というテーマ説明いただきましたが、今内閣不信任案の方が提出されているかと思います。でこれにです内閣といいますか官庁ですね。でもしこれに幹事長が同意をしない場合はですね、おそらくその小沢鳩山グループなどは民主党は出ることになります。そうしますと民主党の党員もですねかなりダダを打って出ていくだろうと。仮にそれが68議席を超える場合は民主党は過半数を取っていませんから、非常にこのペーパーをですね現実化することにも、困難が生じるかと思います。そこで、質問ですけれども、官庁に対するですね不信任、案に対して同意をされますかされませんか。
I'd like to ask a very, very realistic question. You were very kind enough to talk to us about this paper which talked about the future of politics and the Democratic Party. However, we know that there is now a no-confidence motion that is being discussed against, of course, Prime Minister Khan. if the Secretary General yourself does not back up this no confidence motion, it is very likely, people say, that the groups belonging to or following Mr. Ozawa and Mr. Hatoyama might very leave the Democratic Party. As a result of their movements, many other Democratic Party members may leave the party. As a result, if this total number of people who leave go over the number 68, that means that the DPJ will not have a majority in the Shuhin, in the lower house. Which means that this very wonderful paper that you presented to us is probably not going to be something that you will be able to realize or to be able to bring about. So my question is very simple. In regard to this no confidence motion, as the Secretary General, will you support this no confidence motion or not?
非常に過程に満ちたご質問だったと思います。
Well, this again was a very interesting question based on many hypotheses, a very hypothetical question.
不信任案、内閣不信任案はすでに国会において圧倒的な多数で否決をされています。
As you know, there was already a no confidence motion that was presented in the Diet, and it was defeated by a resounding majority.
それからもう一つだけ申し上げれば、気に入らないから出ていくと、それは誰であれですね、そういう議論というのは、私、組織の中で成り立たない国だと思います。
And I would just like to add one other comment, which is that this idea that one leaves an organization, a party, or a group just simply because one doesn't like everything about certain people or about that organization is not an attitude that I think belongs in a true organization. It is not something that can work in any organization.
仮にそういうことが私はないと確信しておりますが、誰かがそういうことをしたとしても、それは大きな動きにはならないでしょう。
Of course, I do not think this kind of hypothetical thing will occur. However, even if someone does make these kinds of choices, I do not think it will lead to a massive movement along the lines of what you just described.
よし。
フリーランス堀田と申します。先ほどこれから組む第3次補正予算が非常に重要で復興の鍵がかかっているというお話がありました。ただもうすでに5ヶ月が経っています。今でも何万人程度が仮設住宅に住んでいたり避難している状況かと思います。スピードという点で本当にこれでいいのか。第3次補正予算が多分通過するのではないかと思いますけれども、他にもっとスピードのある超法規的な行政ができなかったのかどうか、この辺りのことをちょっと話したいと思います。
You mentioned earlier that the passage of the third supplementary budget was very important, that it contained the key for whether or not we would be able to bring relief and reconstruction to the devastated areas. I understand your statements, however, I would like to point out that already 5 months has passed since this disaster occurred, and as a result, I wonder, when you consider the many tens of thousands of people that have evacuated this area or that are living in temporary housing, whether something else could not have been done more quickly and more speedily. In other words, my question is, was it okay to do what the government has, were the actions taken by the government really truly adequate? Or could something have been done that went even beyond normal rules or laws, some kind of extra measures taken that the government could have done to help the people there earlier?
被災地のことを考えれば、なるべく早くということは当然だと思います。そのために全力で努力しなければなりません。
Certainly, when we consider the very severe situation and the suffering experienced by the people in the devastated areas, it was obvious from the very beginning that they needed to be dealt with in a very speedy manner.
その上でいくつか申し上げたいと思います。
But I would like, based on this fundamental assumption, to make a few comments.
一つはすでに2兆円、4兆円、合計6兆円の補正予算を通したということです。
I would like to first of all point out that we have already passed 2 supplementary budgets, 2 trillion yen and 4 trillion yen, for a total of 6 trillion yen to deal with this disaster.
復旧に関することの多くは この6兆円で可能です。
In regard to not the reconstruction but the restoration efforts, I believe most of the restoration efforts can be covered by this 6 trillion yen.
もちろん瓦礫の処理など遅れているものはあります。いろいろな理由が考えられます。特に、地元で、例えば当初言われたのはご遺体をしっかりとですね探しながら処理をしていけばこれは遅くなるのは当然です。大きな重機を使って片付けてしまいますと簡単ですが、それでは亡くなった方々に対して、礼を支することになる、遺族の人々の気持ちを思わないことになる、そういう中で丁寧に進めた結果遅れているという部分があります。そういう現状を分かった上で遅いかどうかを判断していただきたいと思います。
One of the things that has held back the restoration efforts is that the disposal of the debris created by the disaster that has taken much longer than some people might have wished. However, there are several reasons for this. One very important reason is that we might have been able to get rid of the debris or clear away the debris very quickly if we had brought in heavy machinery from the very beginning. However, it was recognized from the very beginning that this process would be slow, in part because we would not use heavy machinery in a very large way. That is because, as you know, in much of the debris there were still bodies that needed to be recovered. And if we were going to be very, very careful and search for bodies, make sure that there was nothing there before we brought in the heavy machinery, we knew from the very beginning that that would take time. So we wanted to show enough respect to the deceased, and we wanted to show enough consideration to the survivors to take this extra time and care. So when you talk about whether this process has been faster or slow, please also take that into consideration.
これだけ大きな災害ですから、人々のなんと言いますか、批判というものがまずは市町村長に寄せられます。市町村長大変な状況になります。で、その市町村長の不満というのが政府の中の菅総理に寄せられます。そういう状況の中で菅総理が非常に強く批判されているということです。これはやむを得ない部分もありますが、しかしこれ未曾有の大災害の中で、何て言いますか、大災害ということもやっぱり考えないと、私はフェアではないと。すべて総理のせいにするというのは簡単ですが、現実はそういうことでは必ずしもないと思っています。
As you know, this was a huge disaster on a scale unprecedented in Japanese history or maybe in world history. As a result, there have been great dissatisfactions expressed by the people in these areas. And these dissatisfactions or these criticisms have first been directed to the local governments. In other words, the local mayors and city officials have come under heavy criticism. The local officials in turn have directed their criticisms and their dissatisfactions to the national government. More specifically, they have directed their grievances to Mr. Khan directly. And so it is as a result of this situation that Mr. Khan finds himself under tremendous criticism. It is a regrettable situation, but certainly when you consider the fact that this is a disaster of an unprecedented scale, it is perhaps an unavoidable situation. However, I think that when one looks at the criticisms that have been directed toward the national government and toward Mr. Khan, I think we also do need to keep in mind that this is a disaster that is unprecedented in terms of its severity and of the damage it has inflicted. Because if you do not take that into account, it is not really fair to simply just criticize Mr. Khan. It is very, very easy to criticize the Prime Minister, but that is not necessarily a justified criticism.
今は非常にいい対応をしたと言われることの多い村山総理、阪神大震災の時の村山総理ですが、当時のメディアが村山総理にどれだけ批判していたかというのは当時のメディアを見れば簡単に分かることです。
Now, in retrospect, people are saying that when the Hanshin earthquake or the Kobe earthquake occurred, the Prime Minister at that time, Mr. Murayama, handled things very, very beautifully. He was very quick in his response, etc. He's praised for his policies. However, if you look back at the media reports of that time, he was under tremendous criticism.
Mr. Okada, the wish of my colleague Anthony Rowley might be realized. You came last time to the club as foreign minister. This time as Secretary General of the Minchuto. Next time you will come here, and I hope soon, as Prime Minister of Japan. Thank you very much. Accept our 1 year honorary